We are talking about the sci-fi movie Future World. Now, to be clear, this is not a spin-off of Westworld, although there was a movie called Future World back in the olden days, which was actually a spin-off of Westworld. Nothing to do with it. This is, in fact, a Mad Max-style, post-apocalyptic, science fiction action movie. Now, this movie, I would say, is a mix between Mad Max and maybe Blade Runner. It has maybe more Mad Max, but it has elements of Blade Runner with this kind of like the synthetic humans and stuff. But the film I would actually compare it most to is 2015's Turbo Kid. Now let me explain the plot, and I'll come back to that. So essentially, it focuses on this young boy who is basically out on his own, trying to kind of find a cure for this disease that is affecting his mother. And he meets up with this beautiful female synthetic android robot, and they kind of team up and they try to go on this kind of adventure together, and they try to be pursued by this evil overlord, kind of like Mad Max style bad guy, played by James Franco and his kind of gang of biker marauders. And as the movie goes on, they'll encounter other allies and other kind of adversaries along the way. In regards to Turbo Kid, that's a very similar setup. There's even a scene in both movies where there's a gladiatorial combat match inside of a dried out swimming pool. So it really is very similar in regards to plot as Turbo Kid. The difference is that Turbo Kid was a knowingly kitsch style kind of throwback to the 80s movies with lots of kind of like gags and humour. This movie takes itself seriously and is more along the lines of your traditional style kind of Mad Max movies, and it obviously plays it straight. But the plot is very similar, I will say. So what works in this movie? Well, let's talk about the directors first of all. James Franco, obviously very kind of big at the moment, obviously with the disaster artist, although he has had some maybe some personal issues. And he co-directs this with Bruce Terry Chung. And this has got a great cast. I mean, listen to this. You've got James Franco. He plays the kind of the main bad guy. You've got Method Man and Snoop Dogg, who are both kind of these this kind of brothel town, so to speak. You've got Lucy Liu. You've got Milla Jovovich. So there's some really kind of like quite good talent actually on screen here. Probably friends of Franco, I would assume, but so it does add a bit of credibility to this movie, and the actual production design, I've got to say, is quite impressive. This doesn't look like your typical kind of very low budget straight to DVD movie. They've actually done some pretty decent some wide shots here. You know, we have the kind of the sandy vistas with the kind of like the bombed out buildings and stuff like that. So it does look like some money has been spent on it. Maybe not like loads, but you know, it looks fairly good for the kind of like the level of movie it's trying to be. There's some great kind of sequences in the desert where we have all kind of the biker gangs all dressed up in their kind of like post-apocalyptic wares and all of that. So it actually does have quite a good look to it. What doesn't work? Well, this movie ultimately is a little bit dull, it's a little bit directionless, and the two main characters are charisma free. So let's break it down a little bit further. Our main protagonist, who is this young lad, pretty much has no character at all. I mean, he's just completely like a blank slate, and nearly as bad as this female android played by Suki Waterhouse. They just don't have any chemistry together. They don't seem to have really an arc at all. I mean, maybe a little bit the Ash, who's the android, but they're just nothing to them. I mean, in fact, if we talk about Ash, played by Suki Waterhouse, who is this female android, did she even need to be an android? There doesn't seem to have any relevance on the actual story. I mean, if you compare it to Turbo Kid again, that actually does play a part into the actual overall story. She could just be a human. She just happens to be an android. It just there's no relevance. I mean, what happens to her in the movie? And there's nothing really to say that she couldn't have just been a human. To be quite honest, when we kind of get to maybe the middle section of this movie, it just grinds to an absolute halt. It really becomes a bit of a slog. I mean, you have two uninteresting leads. I will say they're not necessarily bad acting, they're just not very interesting. There's no chemistry, there's no screen presence. And then we kind of get this story which just seems to meander around and doesn't really have a kind of like a clear direction about what it wants to do. Characters are introduced like really late into the game that we're supposed to care about. And it just becomes a bit of a slog. I mean, we have a kind of quite a fun action sequence towards the end, so it does pick up a little bit where we have these kind of two gangs, one led by James Franco, the other led by Milla Jovovich character, and they have this kind of fight. That's quite fun, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. What the actual plot of this movie is seems to kind of like wobble around and kind of change and kind of like then calls back to something else. It never really seems to be a particularly strong direction here. And although I would say visually it's very impressive, and like I've said, it's really fun to see these cast. I particularly like Milla Jovovich because she does have this kind of like this really kind of eccentric, wacky kind of personality in this movie. She's probably the best thing in it, I would say. And she looks like she's come straight out of her Resident Evil movies. But it just, unfortunately, falls very flat. I mean, I love Turbo Kid, I really do. It's such a fun film, and considering this movie is so similar in regards to plot, but so starkly different in kind of the entertainment value that you get out of it. You know, it's a real kind of, it's a really startling difference, I've got to say. Now, it's not necessarily a completely bad film. Like I said, there are some good production value. It does have some visual flares. There are some quite good action sequences, and some of the actual the way the cinematography kind of like whips around people, I've got to say, is quite fun. But it's by no means a classic. You'll just forget about this movie. So I would say it's a 4 out of 10 for me. There are some elements to be enjoyed here, but I don't think it's a movie that anyone is going to remember once they've seen it. But your opinion could be different to mine. Please let me know if you've seen this film. What do you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for me, and this is a 4 out of 10. Bye for now.